Now, Kant makes the point that moral imperatives are all, that is, all moral imperatives are categorical imperatives, not hypothetical imperatives. And what's kind of interesting about his theory is he states his criterion of morality, his fundamental principle of morality, which is now known, and sometimes the entire theory is known as the categorical imperative. The reason he calls it the categorical imperative is that at times he seems to say every other categorical imperative is somehow a consequence. That is, it's derived from this initial categorical imperative. And here's how he states the categorical imperatives. And I should mention Kant's language is full of technical terms in general, sometimes very difficult to understand. So it'll take us a little while to understand exactly what he's talking about. Sometimes, I think maybe it could have been translated better from German. I'm not sure because I suspect that in German it's as complicated. But here's what he says in the groundwork for the Metaphysics of Morals, which is a small book that he wrote that really captures his entire theory, and that's where our selections were taken from. Act only according to that maxim by which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. That is, you're supposed to act only according to the maxim. What kind of maxim? One, a maxim by which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. And it'll take us a little while to understand exactly what that means. But one way of understanding it, well, I was going to say in bettering, in more understandable English, I'm not sure, but one way of capturing the criterion of morality is as follows. That is, an act is morally right if and only if the agent of the act can consistently will that the generalization of the maxim of the act be a law of nature. And actually, in some of his quotes where he basically says the same thing as he did in that quote, but he rewords it in a certain way, he speaks a little bit more like this other principle that we're talking about. Now, for convenience sake, this is really a lot to say. I'm going to have a shortened way of doing it. There are a couple of things that we should notice that are really somewhat difficult to understand. So some terms: maxim, consistent willing, law of nature, sometimes universal law of nature. We'll get back to those to understand it, but I just want to understand that we can define this term. That is, a maxim is universalizable if and only if the agent who acts upon it can consistently will that its generalized form be a law of nature, the generalized form being one that applies to everybody, just not the individual himself. But we'll explain that a little bit more, so that just as a shortcut in the interim, we're going to talk about the categorical imperative, saying an act is morally right if and only if, and for shorthand we're going to say its maxim is universalizable. But let's now turn in a second to seeing what exactly all of this is supposed to mean.